Cinema is not dying, but the way we talk about cinema is collapsing, and our attention is being dismantled. We turned films into content. We turned taste into engagement. We turned culture into a scoreboard. So this is a podcast for one thing: to make cinema legible again, in a time that wants everything to be noise. Welcome to Conversation Cinema. I'm Emric. I'm a filmmaker. This is Conversation Cinema, where cinema meets the future. Not the future as hype, not the future as gadgets, the future as a question that refuses to go away. What will cinema become? And what must it refuse to become? Every episode will do something simple. One idea, one shift, one consequence, a clear lens you can keep. Sometimes we will talk about films, sometimes artists. Sometimes we will talk about systems, money, platforms, AI, festivals, taste, but always with one rule. We don't chase news. We don't do hot takes. We don't do noise. We do clarity. For decades, cinema had an imperfect but readable ecosystem. You could disagree with it, criticize it, fight it, but you could still see it. You knew what a studio was. You knew what an author was. You knew what distribution was. You knew what a release meant. Today, the map is broken. A film can be brilliant and invisible. A mediocre thing can become gigantic. A masterpiece can land on a platform like a disposable item. And here is the one that hurts the most. A director can be successful while becoming unrecognizable to themselves, because the language of cinema has been replaced by corporate language, pipeline, content, volume, retention, optimization. It's not just ugly, it's dangerous. Because when you change language, you change behavior. And when you change behavior, well, you change what gets made. So, the mission of this podcast is not nostalgia, not back in my days. It's more urgent than that. To rebuild a shared vocabulary for cinema, so creators and audience can resist being programmed. Here is the thesis. Cinema is not only art. Cinema is a civilization tool. It writes memory, and it rehearses the future. It shapes memory, it shapes desire, it shapes the way a generation dreams. A film can change how you love, how you feel, how you look at a city, how you imagine a future. That's not content. That's culture doing its job. And right now, cinema is being pulled by three forces. First, industrial acceleration. More output, less meaning. Second, platform logic. Recommendation system as the new gatekeepers. Third, automation and AI, not just tools, but a temptation to replace taste with templates. None of these forces are evil, but they push in the same direction: standardization. And standardization is the natural enemy of cinema. Because cinema, real cinema, is made of singularity, of risk, of strange choices that make sense only in insight, of the courage to be misunderstood first. Conversation Cinema exists to defend that, not by yelling, by thinking. So, what is this show? It's an essay podcast, a cultural lens, a place where cinema is treated as serious without becoming academic. Each episode is built the same way: a thesis you can repeat in one sentence, a context, where does the shift come from, the consequence, what's changed for creators and audience, the cost, what do we lose if we follow the current, a line, what must we refuse, and a direction, what do we build instead. And over time, you will start to hear it as a simple code: thesis, context, shift, cost, the line, direction. You won't get 20 scattered opinions. You will get one strong idea, carried all the way to the end. Because the opposite of hype is not cynicism, it's rigor. And just as important, what this show is not. It is not a news show. I'm not here to summarize headlines. It is not a review show. I love criticism, but this is not a rating system. It is not a creator growth podcast. We won't talk about hacks. We won't talk about going viral. And it is not a promotional channel. This matters to me. Because the moment a cultural voice becomes promotional, it loses its authority. Now, let me be precise. Conversation Cinema is not anti-films, not anti-career, not anti-artist. If a guest mentions a film they made or a film they're about to release, that can be part of the conversation. What we refuse is something else. We refuse the episode as an operation, PR scripts, angles designed to sell, questions designed to launch. If it can stand on its own without promotion, well, it doesn't belong here. This is a public space, a cultural space, a space for taste. I should be transparent about one thing. Conversation Cinema is connected to a larger ecosystem called AYMK, an author-first studio system and building. But the relationship is strict. Conversation Cinema does not market AYMK. It does not announce project. It does not become a PR extension. To say it simply, AYMK act, Conversation Cinema thinks publicly. And that distinction matters. This show protects its independence, even from my own ambitions. Because the moment this show starts serving ambition, it stops serving cinema. This separation is not cosmetic. It's constitutional. Cinema deserves better than that. So, what does the slogan really mean? Where cinema meets the future? It means we are at a crossroad, a future where cinema becomes a product, optimized, standardized, forgettable, or a future where cinema becomes rare again. Not rare as elitism, rare as necessity, rare because it matters. When cinema meets the future, it meets technology, yes, but it also meets economics, attention, politics, the psychology of audience. The future of cinema will not be decided only by directors. It will be decided by systems. And most people won't even notice the moment they agree to them. So we must learn to see the systems without becoming the servant. This show will be a conversation in three ways. First, a conversation with cinema history. I treat the past like a toolbox, not a museum. Second, a conversation with the present, not in real-time news, but in deep patterns. And third, a conversation with the future, by returning to one question again and again: what do we protect? What do we refuse? What do we build? And why conversation? Because cinema is made of friction between past and future, between art and industry, between author and audience, between technology and taste. And it is also a conversation with world cinema, not as a checklist, but as a way to expand taste. Not just Hollywood, not just Europe, the full map. Overlooked countries, local myths, the films that reshape your inner language. Most episodes will be just me, like today. Sometimes there will be guests, but they won't be here to promote something. They will be here for one idea, one decision, one lens. For season 1, we will publish regularly, but never on autopilot. Expect rigor, not noise. Not necessarily every Tuesday or every Friday, because I won't force an episode into existence. If an episode doesn't feel necessary, it won't exist. I'd rather be silent than dilute the conversation. And I like taking the time to write, because cinema deserves precision. You can also expect a refusal of cynicism, because cynicism is the lazy cuisine of intelligence, and a commitment to one thing: to keep cinema meaningful. Sometimes we'll talk about AI, but always with a rule. Tools can accelerate craft, but they must never replace taste. Sometimes we'll talk about platforms, but always with a rule. Distribution is not culture. And sometimes we'll talk about money, but always with one rule. Money must serve vision, not rewrite it. In the next episode, we start with a simple phrase: cinema is becoming post-industrial. The old industrial model, studios, volume, predictable pipelines, is breaking. But something else is emerging. And it can be beautiful, or it can be catastrophic. Episode 2 is called Cinema After the Industrial Age. If this matters to you, pass it on, quietly. Like culture, not like content. I'm Emric. This was Conversation Cinema, where cinema meets the future.